One of the less covered aspects of the war in Ukraine so far is the enormous impact tens of thousands of foreign volunteers have had on both sides. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said directly following the invasion, on March 6, 2022, more than 20,000 transnational volunteers from 52 different countries had enlisted in their newly formed International Legionnaires unit to fight for Ukraine. Similarly, there are an estimated 20,000 foreign volunteers fighting on Putin's side, including volunteers from Syria and Libya. But are these transnational volunteers still on the front lines today? What challenges do they face? And what can foreign volunteers reveal to us about how effective each side's justification has been for fighting?
Sir, I'm tired of carrying this bulky old leather wallet around everywhere we go. It's always falling apart and getting soaking wet in the field.
You need to get yourself our partner Ridge Wallet. It's small, compact, holds up to 12 cards and $20 bills, leaving plenty of room for you to carry extra hot pockets into combat.
But what about that time that I gave away our entire platoon's position because the enemy heard my keychain rattling? Can Ridge unf me?
Of course. Down in the lab, we created a Ridge key case. It's silent and organizes all of your keys into one place. The key case is simple to operate, even for you.
Now, if only Ridge scientists could develop something that could stop a bullet.
The Ridge wallets we developed are made from durable materials like polycarbonate. It's the same stuff bulletproof glass is made out of.
That explains why Ridge has 50,000 5-star reviews. Place them all over your body for extra protection. I don't know, I like to look stylish when I wore.
Wow, aren't you needy?
No worries, there's over 30 different colors and styles to choose from. Geez, sir, if you love Ridge wallets so much, why don't you marry them? Well, now I can, because Ridge makes tungsten men's wedding band rings. And now's the perfect time, because Ridge Wallet is celebrating their 10-year anniversary. So they're offering my viewers a special up to 40% off. But it only lasts through March 26th. So get the best offer today with my link, ridge.com/taskandpurpose. You can get our biggest discount offer we've ever had of up to 40% off by clicking the link ridge.com/taskandpurpose.
Throughout history, foreign volunteers have influenced the outcomes of wars, and they've been kind of a signal for changes on the horizon. Famously, in 1936, just prior to the start of World War II, over 35,000 foreign volunteers poured into Spain from 52 different countries to help fight in the Spanish Civil War against fascist-backed nationalists led by Francisco Franco. My great-grandfather actually died fighting against Franco in that war, which led to my grandmother Grace immigrating from Spain to the United States. The academic paper Foreign War Volunteers in the 20th Century was written by Nir Ariel and David Radogno. It argues that the quantity of foreign fighters that a war attracts can be kind of a really unique litmus test for how effective a nation's rhetoric is on the world stage, and can reveal a lot about which country's justification for fighting resonates true. Because nations at war say that they represent certain ideals. For example, during World War II, Britain presented itself as the last bastion of European democracy to foreign fighters who wanted to join them. But on the other hand, Nazi Germany said that they were the defenders of European civilization against communism. Then, foreign fighters chose the message they believed to be true. Hopefully, today the war in Ukraine is not a similar warning of a large conflict on the horizon that is yet to come. For its part, Ukraine is presenting themselves as a beacon for the liberal world order, standing up for international norms and democracy, while Russia claims they're fighting against unfair NATO expansionism, driving them into a corner and forcing their hand. Directly following the invasion, Ukraine decided to lift visa requirements, open their embassy hotlines, and publish websites designed to attract foreign volunteers into Ukraine's armed forces to help fight against Putin. On March 6, Ukraine's state news posted this viral Twitter photo of the newly formed Foreign Legion fighting to defend Kyiv from Russia's assault. And so we see the men pictured here are from the USA, Great Britain, Sweden, Lithuania, Mexico, and India, all fighting together against Russia. What sets these transnational volunteers apart from mercenaries that they're often confused with is that they're not fighting for material gain and are often not really compensated at all, but are instead motivated by ideology. They are also separate from humanitarian volunteers in that they agree to take orders, risk their lives, and be prepared to take the lives of others. The transnational wartime volunteers who fought in the international brigades of the Spanish Civil War hoped to stop the march of fascism in Europe to avoid a much larger war. They were unfortunately unsuccessful, but today the foreign volunteers see themselves in Ukraine as attempting to stop Putin's march of authoritarianism. According to the US State Department, a US citizen is allowed to join other countries' militaries, You legally cannot be recruited while you're within the US, so you don't have to worry about Ukrainian military recruiters in the mall or at your high school offering you free Burger King in exchange to fight the Russians. With my recruiter, I negotiated for free fries, just saying. No, you have to apply through the Ukrainian embassy within your nation, which is located in Washington, D.C. for America. But what about the political liability that these foreign fighters represent? Couldn't Russia use captured US troops as leverage, or couldn't that drag us into a bigger war? The US Defense Department says volunteer soldiers lose their neutral status when they join a foreign military, which means American volunteers have no risk of dragging NATO into a larger war. It also means no Delta Force team is going to be sent to Moscow to rescue you if you're captured, and no American F-35 jet assets are going to be diverted to your location to provide bombing support. You're on your own legally and operationally. The reason transnational volunteers sign up to fight against Russia often is because their ideological beliefs within their own state failed them. Many American, Iraq, and Afghanistan veterans feel that the fight in Ukraine was what they wished they were fighting for in the global war on terror. The initial surge of volunteers that arrived in Ukraine ranged in level of experience and motivation. Many of these recruits were rookies when it came to war, and they presented a real challenge. They were wholly unprepared, with many having little to no military experience, or worse, no combat experience. Given the need for raw manpower in Ukraine, originally they didn't turn away untrained volunteers and instead rushed them through a 4-week training program and then sent them to the front lines. The Mozart Group CEO Andrew Milborn reported that in early March, newly minted Legionnaires were utilized to halt the Russian advance in the towns north of Kyiv. While they were successful in halting the Russian advance, their performance was reportedly questionable at best. According to Milburn, this was a wake-up call that the Ukrainians needed to recognize that they needed to dismiss anyone with no military service because inexperienced troops can be more of a liability than a help. Putin understands the political impact large numbers of transnational volunteers could have against him. The side effect is the media coverage that it brings. And so when a Russian airstrike hit the Yavorov military base in Ukraine, the word spread quickly. The attack was part of a volley of an estimated 30 cruise missiles on the 13th of March, with Russia claiming to have hit and KIA'd 180 foreign volunteers who were stationed there. This was a clear message by Putin because he wanted to send a specific clear message to the foreign volunteers about what they were up against. It's the same reason why American prisoners in Ukraine are beaten and It's also served as a wake-up call because after this attack, many volunteers left Ukraine. The Telegraph spoke with one Swedish man who had previous experience in the Kurdish People's Protection Units and said that the war was nothing like Syria or Iraq and was far more chaotic and intense, which is why he left. This is a common theme among foreign volunteers fighting for Ukraine who have combat experience but are not prepared for and never face an opponent that is a more even match with ballistic plates, air, and artillery support. The challenges foreign fighters faced in both the Ukrainian and Russian army is discipline and unit cohesion in foreign units that were thrown together from soldiers around the world. This is a problem seen throughout history in foreign legions. So oftentimes a host nation is skeptical or mistrusts foreign fighters and assigns them to the most dangerous missions to avoid losing their own citizens born in their country. Here's a comprehensive list of all of the respective nationalities that have been reported as part of the Ukrainian International Legion. And here's a list showing the various complicated legal laws from various nations when it comes to permission to fight in foreign militaries. It ranges from some countries saying, sure, go ahead, knock yourself out, to, I don't know, maybe, let me pass it off to the next bureaucrat, to no dang way. One thing I found surprising, because I'm a dummy, is that there are actually over 600,000 people of Ukrainian descent living in Brazil, and a group of roughly 500 Brazilians organized via Telegram to fund plane travel to help fight for their home country's freedom. Brazilian state officials have confirmed several of them have already paid the ultimate price in battles in eastern Ukraine. Due to the fact that Georgia already knows firsthand what it's like to be invaded by Russia in the 2008 war there, many Georgians sympathized with Ukraine and sought to help. Georgians and Ukrainians actually have a history of sending each other volunteers to each other's nations during times of war. A special forces wing known as the Legionnaires Special Services Group was set up for foreigners with SF experience. The group has been successful in carrying out attacks behind enemy lines. The biggest impact that these troops will have is likely not on the outcome of the battles, but on the transfer of knowledge, the best practices, allowing Ukraine to become a melting pot of the best military knowledge from around the world. It's also important to recognize the use of captured foreign fighters as propaganda tools. On June 9, 2022, Alex Strecky and Andy Hahn were captured after their reconnaissance mission went sideways. They were in Ukraine and they were captured by Russia for 105 days until their release in September, along with 8 other foreign fighters from Canada and the UK who were captured by Russian forces and held at black sites where they were beaten, fed multi bread before they were released in a prisoner exchange. These are high-valued prisoners because it gives Russia more leverage in prisoner exchange negotiation. This was a real concern, as British citizen Aidan Aslan was sentenced to death because Russia considered him a foreign mercenary, even though he was a Ukrainian Marine. Russia used Dmytro as a propaganda tool for both external and internal uses. It's used to justify Putin's big claim that this is actually a war against NATO. In this video here, which we've blurred out, he is forced to read a script stating that he is against the war. The previously mentioned Andrew Hill is shown here talking about the atrocities he witnessed by other foreign volunteers. Of course, this confession is fabricated and repeating the major Russian talking points. The type of video is targeted towards Westerners and those inside of Russia's sphere of influence to justify the war. Ukrainian forces have been doing the exact same thing for their part since the start of the war, interviewing Russian pilots on camera and getting them to disavow their country and getting them to say they believe Russia should never have gotten into Ukraine in the first place. Inside of Russia and Ukraine, videos like these are essential in maintaining support for not only the war, but also controlling the narrative. Inside of Russia, the media is essentially controlled by the Kremlin. This clip from Russian state media uses American foreign fighters capture to justify the Kremlin's claim that this is a war of Russia against NATO. The reason Russia does this is because thousands of foreign fighters like this heading to Ukraine shows that many people from around the world stand against them and are willing to risk their lives to show it. But I think it's important to point out not only the successes of foreign fighters, but also the challenges that foreign fighters and Ukrainian authorities face. As the war progressed, a number of these issues were uncovered in the Ukrainian International Legion, and we have access to this information only because Ukraine still has some semblance of free press operating there, unlike in Russia. The Kyiv Independent uncovered evidence that ranges from corruption, threatening legionnaires with physical violence, SA, sending men on supposed suicide missions, and even having criminals running operations. This is common in the history of transnational volunteers during wartime. In fact, there is a long history of interactions between the host country creating friction and hostility between the two. It can create unique challenges for the host nation. The organization of the International Legion is split into 2 halves, with one under the control of Ukrainian ground forces and the other under the control of the Directorate of Intelligence. According to a 78-page long investigative report from the Kyiv Independent, both sides of the Legion have serious systemic issues that they could benefit from addressing. The intelligence wing is unofficially run by Mayor Taras Voshek, Voshek's uncle, also named Taras Voshek, and a man named Sasha Kalashki. One legionnaire reports that in April, the 2 Taras sent a squad to the southern city of Mykolaiv to defend a position. As soon as the Russian forces located this foreign fighter squad, they were instantly shelled. The squad naturally wanted to leave, but the 2 Taras refused, which led to the death of British Legionnaire Scott Sibley and 3 others being injured. Eventually, this squad evacuated, only to have new ones sent to their known and shelled position, going against the previous squad's advice. This new squad suffered 4 KIA, multiple injured, and led to Andrew Hill's capture and was entirely avoidable. While the Taras can be labeled as incompetent, the 3rd man, called Sasha, is an actual wanted Polish criminal who's operating under a false name. Transnational volunteers have complained of receiving no equipment, because why would Ukrainian generals want to send their best equipment and body armor to relatively untrained and unproven units? Sasha has been accused of pointing pistols at legionnaires, stealing equipment, selling gear like thermals that are supposedly unavailable, essaying a fellow female medic, and in this video, ordering men to loot shops. He's been reported numerous times and is under investigation as of August. As dysfunctional as the Foreign Legionnaire unit might be, it's good to see steps are being taken to resolve it, whereas in the Russian foreign units, it appears to be a standard operating procedure and best practice to loot and commit all forms of war crimes. Some of the steps Ukraine has taken to fix the problem with foreign units is requiring applicants to participate in screening interviews, prioritizing individuals with prior military and medical experience, and requiring recruits to sign on an actual enlistment contract of sorts and evaluating volunteers' skills in person before ever considering assigning them to an actual combat unit. It's tough for us to understand the pressures and stress these men are under, and it's easy to judge their decisions in hindsight, but improving foreign fighter conditions is important. The Kyiv Independent concluded that these commanders have friends in high places that ensure that they stay in power and simply push legionnaires out of the legion if they cause problems. Some went as far as to say that it was like fighting on two fronts, one against the Russians and on the other against leadership of the Legion. So where does that leave us today? Considering all that we've previously mentioned, the difficulties that the Legionnaires have faced, it's no surprise that most had left by the summer, according to the Washington Times. By January of this year, it's estimated that only 1,000 to 3,000 remain of the International Legion. This part of a phenomena that is called war tourism is the most cynical way to paint that. This is a significant drop of volunteers, and as the war progressed, there's no indication that the number of legionnaires will reach a similar size to what it had been at the beginning of the war. However, this number is only coming from the International Legion, and they are not the only group made up of foreign volunteers. Some other notable groups are the Georgian Legion, with a size estimate from 300 to 1,000, including Westerners, the Belarusian Regiment with around 1,500 men, and various Chechen battalions. Of course, Ukraine is not alone in having foreign volunteers, as Russia has a number of their own. Russia has seen a number of Serbian volunteers like Dijon Beric, who I interviewed back in September. Dijon claims to have fought on both the Kyiv and Kharkiv fronts lines in Ukraine before being wounded in battle. Officially, Serbia prohibits their citizens from fighting in any foreign government, and they say they're looking into leveling legal ramifications against anyone who does this. Another notable group of people who came to Russia's aid are from Central Asia. One possible motivation for them is that they can acquire Russian citizenship after their service, which points to economic motivation. Russia appears to have placed many Middle Eastern volunteers into units. Russia is utilizing Syrian forces inside of Ukraine. This is extremely hush-hush operation, but an investigative report from Syrians for Truth and Justice note that there have been around 300 fighters transferred between June and September, with many coming from the 25th Special Missions Forces Division. Besides Syrian, former Afghan soldiers who fought with the USA are now signing up in droves to fight for the Russians. An article by Radio Free Europe estimated that around 2,500 Afghans had signed up, which includes former Special Forces members who fear for their lives under Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. They are offered Russian citizenship, decent pay, and combined with a feeling of abandonment by the US, it could explain why they're signing up with Russia. With all of this talk of foreign fighters, it should be noted that in the grand scheme of things, they will not turn the tide of war. Their greatest success is in public relations. By having someone from Serbia dying from a firefight in Kherson or an American being killed in Bakhmut, the conflict is more international. This has become a conflict that people can't ignore because of global participation and the prevalence of these participants documenting their experience. Regardless of the outcome, transnational wartime volunteers are in Ukraine on both sides, fighting for what they feel is right and trying to make an impact in this conflict.